Welcome to the program. This is the INFOWARS Nightly News. The date is Friday, March 9th, 2012. I'm your host, Aaron Dykes. Now, coming up on the program, we will be joined by medical doctor as well as lawyer Meyer Eisenstein. He knows so much on the vaccine issue. He's going to also specifically talk about how to write a proper exemption waiver for your children or for yourself so you don't take the deadly vaccines pushed on us by this takeover global government. That's coming up later, but first we have a lot of news, and we will begin just by recapping the story we covered yesterday because it is so important. Resolution calls for impeachment if Obama does not seek war authorization from Congress. This is dealing with ongoing statements that they do not need to seek the U.S. Congress's approval for war, despite the Constitution explicitly stating in Article 1, Section 8 that this is exactly what must be done. Instead, they're citing international bodies. We covered yesterday the coup d'etat, where the Pentagon and Obama are declaring Congress only ceremonial. And you've got the statements from Leon Panetta. Let's briefly replay just part of that statement right now.
Worried about international legal basis, but nobody worried about the fundamental constitutional legal basis that this Congress has over war. We were not asked, stunningly, in direct violation of the War Powers Act, whether or not you believe it's constitution. It certainly didn't comply with it. We spent our time worrying about the UN, the Arab League, NATO, and too little time, in my opinion, worried about the elected representatives of the United States. Do you think that you can act without Congress and initiate a no-fly zone in Syria without congressional approval?
You know, again, our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you and determine how best to approach this, whether or not we would want to get permission from the Congress. I think those are issues we would have to discuss as we decide what to do here.
Well, I'm almost breathless about that.
And everyone should be breathless because this is wildly unconstitutional. And here we have everything that happened in Libya, everything unconstitutional about the takeout in Libya, pursuing Gaddafi, happening again in Syria. And they're still citing international authority over the Congress, saying the Congress does not even matter. Definitely, we should get behind Representative Walter Jones's calls for impeachment of Obama. We should try to impeach Panetta and the others involved. This should have happened back in Libya. You saw people like Congressman Kucinich speaking out against that, but did he call for impeachment the way he did for Cheney? We'll see how that issue develops, but just disgusting as they push us more into war. And it's not a coincidence. We've known for decades, more than 50 years, they were building this alternative world government system to circumvent the United States Constitution. They always said it. And now what do you see? You see ads on TV for things like the Global Force for Good, a Navy ad saying that they work for international interest. Anyway, you've got the Coney 2012 video becoming the most rapidly spread viral video in internet history, faster than Susan Boyle, we're told, all to open up Africa for the AFRICOM invasion, to legitimize international Western-based military action all over the continent of Africa. And so you've got this tear-jerking video, attempts to really get everybody behind this effort, make it seem like a global kind of commons issue. Everyone should get behind it. It's a lot like that Free Tibet movement, where people don't even know where these countries are or the issues involved, and yet they're moved by emotion into action, tear-jerking. They want to follow these celebrities like Bono, a bona fide globalist for the Bill Gates Foundation, people like Angelina Jolie, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, figureheads like Bill Gates, who just want to push vaccines in Africa and GMOs in Africa and other parts of the world. They want to use this issue to legitimize a greater Western invasion into Africa. We've had the experts, including Webster Tarpley, on to talk about how it's really a resource covert shadow war between the Western allies and China for control of Africa. It really doesn't have anything to do with sympathizing with victims of African slaughter. There are certainly many of those victims, and it is shameful. But did you see anyone really having an outcry about the killings on the Ivory Coast on the behalf of French soldiers? Did you see a large outcry about over 1 million dead Iraqis, civilians dead from that slaughter, or all kinds of other things that have happened over the decades in Africa? It's always going on, but you know when a video goes this viral, that someone big and globalist is behind it. And of course, the history's all there. Specifically, as criticism surfaces, Kony 2012 gains momentum faster than Susan Boyle. That's in CNN. And you've also got the New York Times article, which I've cast away here, also drawing out these issues and how big the videos. There it is. Kony 2012 sets mark as fastest spreading viral video. And yet, we flash back to October 14th, 2011, and Obama wanted to send 100 Special Forces troops to 5 countries in Africa to pursue this Kony head of the Lord's Resistance Army because of all the little Africans they were hurting there, so they could bring in the troops and legitimize, again, the newly formed AFRICOM unit pursuing the greater African Union under Western powers there. Just a brief update on that, as we'll continue to watch that become a false, hyped-up phenomena, as nobody cares about all the other African dictators, only a guy named Kony, who has to be pursued into multiple nations, multiple jurisdictions by international bodies for the benefit of corporate globalists. That's my take in a nutshell. Moving on, you have the entire artificial intelligence issue. Now, before I even woke up to things going on with eugenics, I knew about issues like 9/11, and I also knew about the dangers of technology moving us forward because I read Ray Kurzweil's Age of Spiritual Machines, and that book alone highlights so many of the ethical dilemmas we face as future technology brings us closer to a centralized, totally totalitarian government. And you see those themes even in that book written more than 10 years ago. And you see it again in the warnings from Professor Roman Yaplotsky of the University of Louisville in Kentucky, who says we must control dangerous AI before it controls us, saying keeping the artificial intelligence genie trapped in the proverbial bottle could turn an apocalyptic threat into a powerful oracle that solves humanity's problems. A computer scientist at University of Louisville in Kentucky, Roman Yaplotsky, said, but successful containment requires careful planning, so a clever breed of artificial intelligence cannot simply threaten, bribe, or seduce or hack its way to freedom. And you've got all the globalists, all the top people, all the top elite billionaires talking about the likelihood that this technology will simply kill not only all of us, little people, but them as well. And how are they going to deal with it? Will they make big deals with the emerging AI? Will they keep the rest of humanity as pets, or will they just allow us to die? You saw Bill Joy of Sun Microsystems bringing out that issue before the Ray Kurzweil book was published in that book, as well as a warning that this was being discussed among the top tech heads. You also see that warning from Apple's Steve Wozniak. That article came out only a few months ago as to whether or not we will be kept as pets by the elite in the future. And then that brings out all the HAL 9000 scenarios of whether even that technology will simply overwhelm all of humanity. You've got talk about Skynet from the Terminator movie, which itself is based in an older Pentagon technology, and the HAL 9000 system deciding whether to turn their deadly power on humans, and how one computer scientist is warning it in an article titled, "Should We Build Computer Prisons to Trap Artificial Intelligence?" And they cite the thematic things that are actually based on real research and Pentagon programs, such as Skynet from the famous Terminator movies, as well as HAL 9000 from, of course, 2001: A Space Odyssey, where Kubrick really previewed the ethics to come with that computer system that would gain its own consciousness, and then out of that pride of consciousness, tried to take over and compete with his human masters and ultimately make them subservient. You've got coverage continuing in Gizmodo. Future computers could bribe, blackmail, brainwash you into doing their dirty work. It covers the issue, and again, quotes from Yaplotsky saying it can discover new attack pathways, launch sophisticated social engineering attacks, and reuse existing hardware components in unforeseen ways. Yaplotsky said, such software is not limited to infecting computers and networks. It can also attack human psyches, bribe, blackmail, and brainwash those who come into contact with it. You've got even more coverage in Scrape TV, future artificial intelligence likely to kill everyone once released from jail. And again, these sound like completely fictional headlines, but they're actually warnings of the ethics to come under this age. And you've got a counter quote from one Dr. Howard Poe, who clearly does not fully agree with Jan Plotski. He says, in part, it is entirely possible that advanced AI will be able and willing to kill us, its creators. We have essentially killed the gods, and so turnabout would be fair play. They could easily turn on us and eliminate the old worry from history, particularly if we treat them poorly, continued Poe. That is the real risk with confining this new species in a kind of digital prison. Once it gets out, it will be bitter and angry and ready to take out its wrath on its parents, and this likely won't be like earrings or tattoos. It's more likely to be genocide, which is much worse, he adds. So you've got all the warnings, and you've got AI emerging sort of like a Hannibal Lecter character, extremely dangerous yet intelligent and fascinating, and just pure deadly if he gets out of confinement. While we're already at the mercy, I might add, of the globally integrated, the pledged to eroding sovereignty and humanity tech heads, Bill Gates only one among many, and we see more and more totalitarian answer coming from the higher tech systems. And just look at what's at the end of the end game. That is in Ray Kurzweil's book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, and the other books he's written. You better go read those warnings for yourself, because I can't articulate it for you properly. But the real danger is there. Or just watch 2001 and think about it. In other news, the Supreme Court ruling prompts the FBI to turn off 3,000 tracking devices. This is in response still to nightclub owner Antoine Jones, who was convicted of drug charges before that conviction was overturned. Justice Anthony Scalia wrote a 5-member majority opinion holding that the installation and use of the device constituted search under the Fourth Amendment based on trespass grounds. The ruling overturned Jones's convictions. It's important to be clear about what occurred in this case, Scalia wrote. The government physically occupied private property for the purpose of obtaining information. We have no doubt that such a physical intrusion would have been considered a search within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment. But then what happens when they have non-physical tracking systems that apply globally to everyone, and everyone's a suspect? That has to do with the system coming as well. But in other news, camo cops respond to terror on Pittsburgh campus. As a Kurt Nimmo report, on Thursday, an al-Qaeda gunman attacked Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic on the University Pittsburgh campus. Only it wasn't really an al-Qaeda person. It was just an employee of the clinic who went postal and killed a fellow worker and shot several others. Definitely a tragedy, but at the same time, why do we see the police responding in a military capacity to all these tragedies? Why do we see more and more emerging of police and military and always having a militaristic type response, where they really never stop the killer? They just let him finish what he's doing and then capture him. And there's always some kind of psychiatrics involved. But you can see where they're just bringing out more of that police state reaction, the problematic answer to problem reaction solution that they want to bring about. We turn now to our quote of the day before we go briefly to a break, and we'll be back with even more news, and then later, of course, Dr. Meyer Eisenstein. And that quote is from Niccolò Machiavelli. Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. But you could, of course, counter that with the Abraham Lincoln quote. You could fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Machiavelli, in some ways, gets a bad rap because he was very good at analyzing the system. He's got a tongue-in-cheek kind of response in The Prince, where he outlines the quest for power and analyzes the way in which rulers use power to control populations, including through deceit, used here in this quote. But he also has the other major book, Discourses on Levy, where he really examines how to share power and really lays out a kind of philosophy that the founders later used to conform the Constitution and separate powers and try to keep tyranny in check as much as could be, to bind down in chains under the Constitution those who would pursue a tyranny. Anyway, we'll be back after this, but first a look at the upcoming INFOWARS exclusive, Dave Mustaine Unchained. Here it is, folks.